My great-great-grandmother won't let go. I haven't spoken to my family in over a decade. Not since I packed a single duffel bag and fled that suffocating little town at 18, vowing never to set foot there again. The memories of that place are like a weight I've carried for years. Narrow streets lined with sagging porches, air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the oppressive, unshakable sense that something was always watching. I buried those memories deep, locked them in a corner of my mind I swore I'd never revisit. My wife, Emily, knows only fragments of the story, just enough to assume it's a typical family feud, an emotional rift born of stubborn pride or some long-forgotten slight. She thinks time will soften me, that one day I'll open up about my childhood, my parents, or the creaking, shadow-filled house where I grew up. But I've never told her about the oval-framed photograph of my great-great-grandmother Clara that hung above the mantel, her eyes piercing through the dust and gloom, seeming to follow me no matter where I stood in the room. I've never mentioned the way her presence clung to that house, even long after her death, like a stain that wouldn't fade. Whenever Emily pressed for details, I'd cut her off with the same tired line. "It's better left in the past." She'd nod, her expression soft and sympathetic, assuming I meant heartbreak or betrayal. I let her believe that, because the truth was too heavy, too impossible to put into words. Last week, everything I tried to bury clawed its way back to the surface, and now I'm not sure I'll ever escape it. It started with a voicemail, innocuous at first, like a pebble dropped into still water. Emily was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, her phone propped against a jar of spices as she scrolled through notifications with one hand. The late afternoon light slanted through the window, catching the steam rising from a pot on the stove. She paused, tilting her head, and played a message left on our ancient home phone. A relic we kept more for nostalgia than utility, its beige plastic cracked from years of use. "I thought you said you didn't talk to your family?" she asked, her voice light, almost playful, as she turned to me, wiping her hands on a checkered dish towel. The message was from an unfamiliar number, the voice frail but warm, dripping with an old-fashioned cadence that sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm so glad to finally meet him. I'll be there soon." Emily's eyes sparkled with curiosity, her lips curving into a smile as she leaned against the counter. She thought it was sweet, maybe a long-lost aunt or cousin reaching out to mend bridges, a gesture of reconciliation after years of silence. "That's so nice," she said, her tone bright, almost excited. "Maybe someone's trying to reconnect. You should call them back." My stomach churned, a cold dread spreading through my limbs like ice water. I recognized that voice, not exactly, but enough. The way it lingered on vowels, the faint rasp of age, the unsettling warmth. It was her. My great-great-grandmother, Clara. The woman who died 10 years ago, her funeral a blur of hushed voices, my mother's tear-streaked face, and the heavy scent of lilies in a church I hadn't stepped foot in since. "That's not possible," I said, my throat so tight I could barely get the words out, my hands gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. "She's gone. Clara's been dead for a decade." Emily's smile faltered, her brow furrowing as she studied me, her eyes flicking between confusion and concern. "What are you talking about? Who's Clara?" she asked, stepping closer, her voice softer now, laced with worry. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed the phone, my hands trembling so badly the receiver nearly slipped from my grip. I checked the caller ID, my heart pounding as the numbers stared back at me. The area code matched that godforsaken town, a place I hadn't thought of in years, its name alone enough to make my skin crawl. I dialed the number back, my pulse roaring in my ears, but a robotic voice informed me it was disconnected. The line dead, as if it had never existed. "Maybe it's a prank," Emily offered, her tone uncertain now, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. She reached out, her hand brushing my arm, but I flinched, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't tell her how my palms were slick with sweat, how my mouth tasted of metal, or how I spent that night pacing the house, checking every lock, every window, and hovering over our son Liam's crib, watching his tiny chest rise and fall, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. The first real sign came a few nights later, At exactly 3:08 a.m., a time that would soon haunt me. I was half awake, tangled in restless dreams of that old house. Its warped floorboards, the ticking of a cuckoo clock in the hallway, the faint smell of mildew that never left. The baby monitor on my nightstand crackled to life, a sharp burst of static that jolted me upright. A soft, lilting melody filled the room. A collie bell my mother used to hum when I was a child. One she'd learned from Clara, passed down like a family heirloom. The notes were slow, deliberate, each one curling into the next like smoke, heavy with memory. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs, the sheets twisted around my legs. Emily stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent, her hair spilling across the pillow. I was already staring at the monitor's grainy screen, my breath catching in my throat. It showed Liam's crib, his small form curled under a blanket, sleeping soundly, his face peaceful in the dim glow of the night light. But the rocking chair in the corner of the nursery was moving, its wooden frame creaking back and forth in a slow, unnatural rhythm, as if someone sat there, pushing it with purpose, their weight shifting the floorboards beneath. The air in our bedroom felt wrong, heavy and cold, my breath fogging in front of me like I'd stepped into a meat locker, the chill seeping into my bones. I stumbled out of bed, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood as I made my way to the nursery. The collie bell still humming through the monitor, louder now, almost mocking, its melody weaving through the dark. The nursery door was ajar, just as we'd left it, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open, my pulse roaring in my ears, my hand trembling as I gripped the doorknob. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, casting soft shadows across the walls. Liam was still asleep, his tiny hands curled into fists, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The rocking chair was motionless, its carved backrest gleaming faintly in the dim light, the lace doily draped over its arm undisturbed. But the air was frigid, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache, the kind that feels alive, pressing against your skin. I stood over the crib, watching Liam breathe, my eyes darting to every corner of the room, half expecting to see something. Someone, lurking in the shadows. Nothing. The collie bell had stopped, the monitor silent once more. I told myself it was a glitch, a trick of my exhausted mind, a nightmare bleeding into reality. But when I crawled back into bed, my heart still racing, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found it on the kitchen table, nestled between a stack of unopened bills and Liam's sippy cup. A note, written in spidery, old-fashioned cursive that made my skin crawl, the letters looping and jagged, like they'd been scratched into the paper with a quill. So good to see my boy. Great-great-gran. The paper was yellowed, brittle, like something pulled from an attic trunk, and the ink was a deep, rusty brown, almost like dried blood. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it in the letters my mother kept, brittle pages Clara had written decades ago, tucked away in a metal box I was forbidden to touch as a child, its lock rusted but unyielding. Emily was pouring coffee, the gurgle of the machine filling the kitchen. When I grabbed the note, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "What's that?" she asked, leaning over my shoulder, her voice curious but unconcerned. I didn't answer. I stumbled to the stove, flicked on the burner, and held the paper over the flame, watching as the blue gas licked at its edges. It wouldn't burn. The edges curled and browned, but the ink stayed pristine, the words glaring up at me, mocking my desperation. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Emily snapped, snatching the note away, her eyes wide with alarm. "It's just paper, David. Why are you acting like this?" I couldn't speak. I just stared at it, my vision tunneling, the room tilting around me, the note's words searing into my mind. Things escalated from there, each day tightening the knot of dread in my chest. Emily didn't notice, she couldn't or wouldn't, but I saw it all, felt it in every fiber of my being. One night, she was in the nursery, feeding Liam in the rocking chair, her silhouette soft in the glow of the night light, her movements gentle as she rocked him back and forth. I passed by the open door, my steps heavy from another sleepless night, and glanced at the antique mirror we'd hung on the wall. A flea market find Emily loved for its ornate frame and cloudy glass. My breath caught a sharp, painful hitch in my chest. There, in the reflection, was Clara. She stood behind Emily, her lace dress yellowed and frayed, the fabric clinging to her skeletal frame like cobwebs. Her smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally across her face. Her lips thin and cracked, her eyes sunken and gray, like rotting fruit left to fester. Her teeth were small, sharp, crowded in her mouth like pebbles, glinting faintly in the mirror's warped light. She was looking at Liam, her bony hands hovering just above his head, fingers twitching as if she could pluck him from Emily's arms and claim him for herself. I froze, my voice trapped in my throat, my body rooted to the spot. In the room itself, it was just Emily and Liam, her humming a soft, unrelated tune as she rocked him. Oblivious to the presence I could feel pressing against the air. She looked up, frowning, her eyes meeting mine in the doorway. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her tone half teasing, half concerned. I forced a nod, my mouth dry, my tongue heavy. "Yeah, I lied," the word barely audible. "Just tired." The nights grew worse, each one a descent into a private hell I couldn't escape. Every night, without fail, 3:08 a.m. became a ritual of dread. The hour when the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her. The baby monitor would crackle, that damned collie bell filling the house, its notes weaving through the walls like a living thing. Sometimes it was Clara's frail, trembling voice, each word dripping with a sickly sweetness. Sometimes it was something deeper, warped, like a vinyl record played backward, the sound scraping against my nerves. Toys began to move. Liam's stuffed bear, a gift from Emily's mom with button eyes and a stitched smile, would end up in the hallway one night, then the kitchen the next, its black eyes staring up at me as if it knew something I didn't, as if it were watching me back. Our neighbors, an older couple who lived across the street, pulled me aside one morning as I took out the trash, their faces etched with unease. "You got a nanny staying with you?" the wife asked, her tone polite but strained, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. "We saw a woman in the nursery window last night, singing. Looked like she was holding the baby." My blood ran cold, my mouth dry as ash. "No nanny?" I muttered, my voice barely audible, my eyes fixed on the ground. "Must have been Emily." They exchanged a glance, their lips pressed into thin lines, but they didn't press. That night, I checked every lock twice, taped the nursery curtains shut, and stood guard outside Liam's room until dawn, my hands clenched into fists. I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't happening, couldn't keep lying to myself or Emily. I hadn't spoken to my cousin Sarah in years, not since I cut ties with everyone tied to that town, severing every thread that connected me to my past. But I found her number buried in an old email, my fingers trembling as I dialed. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious, like she was expecting bad news. "David? What's going on?" she asked, her tone guarded, the distance between us palpable even over the phone. When I mentioned Clara, the line went silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. "You know she was different," Sarah said finally, her words careful, deliberate, each one chosen with precision. "She could see things, spirits, futures, things nobody should know. The family said she could tie herself to the bloodline, bind her soul to us, to our children. There's a story, passed down from my mom, your mom, all of us. If a baby was born on Clara's day, October 12th, she'd come back, to watch over them, to keep them." My heart stopped, a cold weight settling in my chest. Liam was born on October 12th, almost a year ago to the day, his birth a quiet joy that now felt tainted. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. "She loved too much, David. She never let go, not even in death. She'd do anything to stay with her babies." I tore through the garage that night, digging through boxes I'd sworn never to open. Relics of my childhood I'd hauled across state lines but never unpacked. Their contents a Pandora's box of memories I'd rather forget. There were photos, faded and curling at the edges. Clara's face staring out from every one. Her smile always too knowing. Her eyes too sharp, like she saw something the camera couldn't capture. I found letters, too, written in that same spidery cursive, addressed to my mother when I was a kid. Their pages brittle and yellowed, the ink faded but still legible. One ended with a line that made my skin crawl, the words burning into my mind. I'll always be with my babies, no matter where they go. I burned it in the backyard, watching the paper curl into ash, the flames casting flickering shadows across the lawn. This time it caught, but the victory felt hollow, the air still heavy with her presence. Last night I reached my breaking point, the weight of it all too much to bear. I couldn't let this continue, couldn't let Clara's shadow hang over my family any longer, couldn't let her sink her claws into my son. I sat in the nursery, gripping a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark like a blade. Liam slept in his crib, his breath soft and even, his tiny hands curled against the blanket. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. At 3:08 a.m., the lights flickered, a low hum vibrating through the walls, the air growing thick and cold. The rocking chair creaked, faster now, its rhythm erratic, like someone was pushing it with desperate force, the wood groaning under invisible weight. The collie bell started again, not from the monitor but from everywhere. Above me, below me, inside my skull, its notes twisting into something grotesque, something alive. Emily walked in, her eyes glassy, her movements slow and mechanical, like a puppet on strings. She was holding Liam, cradling him against her chest, but her face was blank, her lips parted as if listening to something I couldn't hear, her steps unsteady as she moved toward the crib. In the mirror, Clara was there, her presence a violation of everything sacred. Her lace dress hung off her skeletal frame, the fabric yellowed and frayed, clinging to her like a second skin. Her smile split her face wider than any human mouth could stretch, her lips cracked and bleeding, her eyes pits of gray rot, glinting with a hunger that made my stomach turn. Her teeth were shards of glass, crowded and sharp, catching the light as she leaned toward Liam. She was reaching for him, her fingers curling like claws, her voice a low, guttural hiss that echoed in my mind. Mine! I screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore from my throat, and drove my fist into the mirror, the glass shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces, raining onto the floor like broken stars. Emily snapped out of her trance, clutching Liam as he wailed, his cries piercing the silence. The room felt warm again, the air lighter, the collie bell gone, its absence a relief so profound I nearly collapsed. Emily was sobbing, demanding answers, her voice raw with fear, her arms wrapped protectively around our son. I told her everything. Clara, the curse, the bloodline, the stories Sarah had shared, the truth I tried to outrun. She didn't believe me, not fully, her eyes wide with disbelief, but she didn't argue when I dragged the rocking chair to the backyard and set it ablaze, the flames licking at the night sky, the wood popping and hissing as it burned. She didn't stop me when I gathered every mirror in the house and smashed them in the driveway, the glass glinting under the streetlights, each shard a small act of defiance. We thought it was over. We thought we'd won, that we'd broken her hold, that we'd reclaimed our home, our son, our lives. But every morning, without fail, there's a new note on the kitchen table, nestled among the mundane clutter of our lives. Cereal boxes, coffee mugs, Liam's scattered toys. He's mine. You don't understand. I'm just caring for him. Same yellowed paper, same rusty ink, same handwriting that haunts my nightmares. Its loops and curls a taunt I can't escape. I've tried burning them, shredding them, burying them in the yard under the weight of rocks and dirt. They always come back, pristine and untouched, as if they'd never left the table, as if she's laughing at my efforts. I've stopped sleeping, my eyes bloodshot, my hands trembling as I check on Liam every hour, every night, my flashlight sweeping the nursery for any sign of her. I watch his tiny chest rise and fall, searching his face for any trace of her presence, any hint that she's still here, still watching, still waiting. Tonight, though, something changed, a shift so subtle I almost missed it. I fell asleep, deep, dreamless sleep, The kind I haven't had in weeks. My body finally surrendering to exhaustion. I didn't wake at 3:08 a.m., didn't hear the monitor crackle, didn't feel the air turn cold. The house stayed silent, the nursery still, the night unbroken. But then Liam's cries pierced the quiet, sharp and desperate, pulling me from the fog of sleep like a hook in my chest. I ran to the nursery, my heart in my throat, my bare feet slipping on the hardwood, my breath ragged as I fumbled for the light switch. He was in his crib, screaming, his tiny face red, his fists flailing against the blanket. I scooped him up, whispering his name, pressing him against my chest, trying to soothe him, to anchor him to me. But his voice, it wasn't his. It was hers. Soft, lilting, singing that damned collie bell through my son's mouth, the notes curling like smoke in the dark, each one a violation, a claim, a promise she'd never let go. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fight this, how to protect my son from a woman who's been dead for a decade but refuses to stay gone. Clara's not just a ghost. She's a force, a hunger, a love so suffocating it defies death itself. Every night, I sit by Liam's crib, my eyes burning, my hands clenched, listening for her voice, watching for her shadow. I wonder if I'm losing him, if she's already claimed him, if her relentless, possessive love will take my son away from me forever. I wonder if I'll ever sleep again, or if I'll spend the rest of my life waiting for 3:08 a.m., waiting for her to sing, waiting for her to win.